It's Dr. Manny. Welcome to Asylum. Okay, so the idea is basically I want to explore the concept of fear because anything, once you understand it, you're able to develop a certain autonomy over it. You're able to be. Hi, Michael. Thanks for dropping by. Hey, Jamie. Thanks for dropping by. Welcome to Asylum. So, by understanding it more, it becomes more closely connected to reality, more empirically valid, more useful. Okay? So when you think of the word fear, you you're thinking about something inside. You're thinking about your reaction, your response to your interpretation of the circumstance. Whereas when you're talking about danger, you're talking about what is truly outside. Okay? So you would imagine that becoming fearless or decreasing the amount of fear would therefore involve decreasing that delta, that space between what's truly out there and your level of physiological response, your level of mental and emotional shutdown, your level of reactivity, your level of overwhelm, your sense of just the load in your pants. You gotta connect that to reality because sometimes instead of crapping you need to run, and then other times you need to fight. Other times you need to reevaluate the situation so that you could think or negotiate your way out of it. None of that happens if you're afraid. When you're afraid, you're in fight, flight, freeze, faint mode. You have four choices. An event has happened outside, and you know you basically you got to ask yourself, what did you actually experience? What did you see? What did you see happen? For example, the way we're wired, we go limbic really quick, and if a dark shadow flies overhead, you don't have to get a good view of what created that shadow for you to duck, run, and hide. We're wired like that. That's how we survived. But at the same time, we we create these internal models of what's out there. We see fire. We know to stay a certain distance from the fire. We see the edge of a cliff. We know how close we can get to it. But if that cliff is between us and where we want to go, then fearlessness would involve getting a running start, getting coming up with a plan, thinking to yourself, "Hey, Tamika, thanks for dropping by. Welcome to Asylum." It would involve asking yourself, "Do you want what's on the other side of that bad enough where you're either going to take a running jump or you're going to get a team together and go down in the canyon, whether you're going to see if it's possible to go around, whether one of your homies knows how to make airplanes. You know, becoming fearless involves, instead of letting your mind shut down entirely. Hey, Doc Andrews, thanks for joining me in Asylum. Welcome. So, what you want to do in the moment is ask yourself, and this is what they say, connecting with your values. Ask yourself what you really want, because fear can distract us. Fear can startle us into doing reactive stuff that has nothing to do with neither the trigger or what we want. Just doing old scripts from the past that you just did when someone startled you afraid or when someone made you anxious. Hey, Candace, glad you're able to join us in Asylum. So, what you want to do is you want to look at the vision. You want to look across the chasm. And a lot of times they say don't get caught up in the how, because if you're like, I can't jump this, and you get caught up and you repeat yourself, I can't jump this, I can't jump this, I can't jump this, eventually your mind forgets that you said I can't jump this, and it abstracts it to I can't cross this, I can't access what's on the other side, and then you shut down and you go into fear mode. Now, sometimes a lot of us, we reactively become angry because the anger makes us feel more powerful, but that's not fearless. It's not courageous. And what I do to remind myself of courageous has a French root word cœur, which means heart. in it. You're not acting from your heart. Now, a lot of times when we're angry, we displace aggression. We target whoever happens to be there. We see red and we explode. We do a bunch of damage that essentially is self-sabotage, stuff we're going to have to clean up later. Stuff that's not aligned with our values. We drop into, they say during fight, flight, freeze, faint, you have a different set of values. And then when you come back to your right mind, when the thing that caused the fear is gone, then you have this cognitive dissonance looking back on what you just did from the point of the trigger, from the time you became afraid to who you are now, to the time that you reconnected to your, what they call higher self, to who you are now. And then you look at how afraid was I? For how long? What damage have I done? What relationships have I withdrawn from? What conclusions have I jumped to and like just gone into a shell or gone into an evil place about? How long have I been this way? Because after a while, it's no longer fear. It becomes an anxiety, which is still disconnected from the initial danger. That's the first thing you forget when you're afraid. And so when the fear is triggered, hey, Anitra, thanks for joining me in Asylum. So the first thing you want to do when you're afraid is, well, really you want to remember something beautiful, which sounds ironic, but you want to remember the thing that you value the most, the thing that aesthetically sets your heart on fire the most, to the point that you feel confident. Not necessarily confident in the how. You don't know how you're going to get across, but you believe that you will. You know that you will. Something inside you knows that you will. Now, when you look at a butterfly, it's beautiful and it's dainty and it looks fragile, but it's flying all over the place, fearless. And you ask yourself, how can it do that? But you have to remember, just a blink of an eye ago, that butterfly was in the darkest cocoon. And even before the cocoon, that butterfly had felt so ugly and undeserving. And now it's beautiful. It's crossed over. If you think the butterfly, if it had sat there and thought, okay, I'm gonna have to make these wings, how they gonna look? Oh God, I ain't never made wings. Oh, I'm supposed to fly. I'm supposed to go up there with it after all a lifetime of having known nothing but just kind of being this slimy, sluggish thing on the ground with this low view that no one even wants to look at. They step over it and it's slimy and disgusting feeling. If the butterfly had gotten caught up in the fear, then that would have been a cortisol-ridden butterfly. You can't go through the transformation process loaded with cortisol. You got to let the other stuff in. And in higher humans, that's oxytocin. You got to let the human contact in. You got to let the stories in. You got to let the beauty in. You got to accept the gratitude, because if you're imagining the future and you're afraid of it, it affects what the future looks like when you get there. You know, if that butterfly had been running laps, still being afraid of heights, being afraid of all these things above it, stepping down on it, crunching it. I mean, you look at how beautiful and fragile those wings are, but up until that point in that butterfly's life, it has been at an ugly, dark place, stuck, closed away. And now it's beautiful. There's nothing you're going to do to stop that butterfly from flying like that. Nothing, because it knows its beauty. Now, but what if the butterfly got so caught up while in the cocoon in the larval stage that it never came out, you know? What if it got so afraid that the fear never came to an end? And when the fear never comes to an end, you never get to do the closure. You never get to do the reflection. You never get to look back and say, look how I've been acting. Look how I've been being. That's not me anymore. At least it will no longer be me once I let go of the fear. Because the whole transformation process is mediated by your chemicals. It's mediated by your allocation of your energy, which is essentially what your neuroendocrine system does. If you're anticipating fear, if you're anticipating isolation, your entire system, I think it goes really bacterial as opposed to viral. You get this autoimmune response. Whereas if you're not thinking about your fear and being ousted social fear, and you're not in this soup of cortisol and identity defense, your working memory is not constricted. If you're not in those states, then you can pull up a feeling of beauty. But what usually happens when you do that, though, is the worry makes you feel delusional. When you're in the midst of a worry, the worry has this weird soothing feeling to it, although it's unproductive. And there's a guilt that comes up when you even think about stopping to worry. So you get caught in these stories. What should I be doing? And you forget that this is the fear of scarcity. This is you looking back on. I mean, imagine if as a butterfly you imagined yourself coming out an ugly butterfly, a moth. No insult to moth lovers, of course, right? So you came out. The whole time you were sitting there thinking to yourself, "Oh God, I'm gonna come out this ugly butterfly." And I can't even say a black butterfly because in our culture they've put a lot of negative associations with the black framing. It's an implicit association mechanism. The dark horseman, death. But unless you're in Africa, because they put all that on white in Africa, just for the record, just to be clear. But when this butterfly, if it imagined itself without certain aspects and just had thought of itself as a darker version of itself, even coming out of the cocoon, it could have created a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the way the chemicals work, it's the energy that was within the butterfly, within the larva, within the slug that went into the cocoon. It was the management of that energy within that transformative state that resulted in a shift of all those energies. And if you imagine, I like to imagine my shift of energy as the focus of my attention, the story I'm telling myself, the consciousness that I have around me that is actually true and relevant. It's aware of the danger around me, but is not afraid to a disproportionate amount. And as such, it's not reactive. It's creative. My energy is more allocated to my self-expression, to what can I create that's beyond my imagination, that will take me to places beyond my fears, where my fears will be irrelevant looking back. That's the mechanism of becoming fearless. But when you stumble and you get caught up in those loops, that guilt, what should I be doing? What should I look like now? Oh, my cocoon doesn't look good enough, and you waste time putting furniture in a cocoon when what you're supposed to be doing is resting and transforming. A misallocation of energy. You start doing cocoon comparisons when you were supposed to be finding a good spot and just heading, trusting what's inside to do the rest. And that's the whole concept of getting caught in ego, getting caught in identity, being overwhelmed by the negative feedback from your tribe of origin. Yeah, that's self-sabotage is no joke, Jamie. Hey, Patrice, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Asylum. So, you can't get rid of fear by talking angry to yourself. A lot of us have this bad habit, and that comes from the scarcity place. Because in a scarcity place, you think about how people act when they think a situation is bad. Suddenly they bring out their rude self. They tell you what they really think. They don't put energy into the niceties. They misallocate energy into the drama. And they entirely overlook what is there, what is possible within that moment. And they claim it's because they're afraid. Thank you, Patrice. Happy holidays to you too. And they'll claim it's because they were afraid. The fear made them angry because they were afraid that if they stayed in that moment, in a space of scarcity, you're afraid that if you don't act now impulsively, even though the impulse is anger and destruction and self-sabotage, you're afraid that if you don't do something right now, that someone else will have beaten you to the move. They will have gotten the last of something. But you have to imagine as a butterfly, the last of what? The last of what that a slug knows about within his limits of his ego, her identity in that moment. Hey, Josie, thanks for dropping by. Welcome to Asylum. Hey, Kwanzaa, thanks for dropping by. Welcome to Asylum. So the question becomes, what in the imagination of a slug, based off of what it has lived up until that point, would ever come close to what the butterfly ended up being? And what was the value of the worry before crossing that chasm? I mean, if you got to the edge of the cliff as a slug and you got so caught up in how you were going to get across within the limits of what you're able to conceive, and you mistook inconceivable for impossible, you got too caught up in the beliefs limited by your identity. And first of all, you spent a bunch of time at the edge revving, and you got your chemicals all wrong, so you didn't reach your full potential. When you came out, yeah, you were able to fly, but again, you had moth-like colors because of the chemistry you set up during the transformation process. Because instead of going inwards, what you did was you got caught up in the drama, you got caught up in the stories, you got caught up in everything but your signal, what was truly happening in the moment. You never assessed the danger and saw the opportunity in the danger, the promise in the danger, the promise in the present moment. That's all you give up with fear. And then if you try to tough talk yourself to jumping out of the fear using the anger, if you guilt yourself or worry yourself to the point of imagining a scarcity in which you get the last set of wings, old rusty used pair of wings, you're going to get what you imagine. You're going to get what you jump towards. If instead of trying to jump across the entire chasm and flying, you just got stuck in what you could imagine, and you're going to be that butterfly that want to hop from rock to rock and never actually soar and never actually fully spread your wings because you're still caught up. Hey, Barry, thanks for joining me in Asylum. So if you get caught up in that emotional state. Now, if you want to geek about it, the concept that I'm trying to explain to you as a metaphor is what's called, Barry, is it a Markov walk? Where you can only go, and we live in these states, these conscious states, and we experience them as emotional states. But you can only see so far from one state to those that are available to you next. And if you're in a fear state, you can only see, like I said, those four positions. Hey, Jared, thanks for joining me in Asylum. So, in a fear state, the way you become fearless is by connecting to the truth, by looking at the delta empirically between what's out there, the danger, and your level of reaction, your response to it. The fear. You make the fear less. Okay? And you do that, and the way I remember it is by having courage. And again, cœur is the French word for heart. So get out of your head, get into your heart, they like to say all the time. So in your heart, you would imagine the way your heart reacts when you're in love, when you're around something you value, when you're feeling something beyond your ability to think of, beyond the ability to imagine, when you're experiencing beauty and awe, when you're experiencing gratitude for actually allowing yourself to receive something in the moment. That state, that gratitude, that acceptance, that connectedness to truth, when you're actually taking account of what's here and now and what's possible and projecting into your future states without the scarcity, without the lack, without the competition, without the comparison, without the ego and identity boundaries, without those stories revving during what should be your cocoon stage, your transformation stage, that if you extend enough becomes this long fear state, this sadness, this anxiety, this depression, this mourning, this loss, this story that right now doesn't exist other than as a story. So the process of becoming fearless involves intending to go where you feel beautiful, deciding what that beauty looks like to you, noticing when guilt, shame, and limitations from this past story, this slug state, pulls you back, noticing who around you you're comparing yesterday's with. You know, you're looking at each other's cocoons and seeing whose cocoons look better than whose, when you ain't gonna need the cocoon. Don't put furniture in the cocoon. That's energy that could be going into butterfly status, yo. So reaching in, this is, instead of acting from a place of fear, acting from a place of love, acting from these heart metaphors, acting from a trust, acting from an abundance, and basically in that moment realizing that you want to take an empirical look at where you are now, what you want in the future, what it's going to take to get there, who around you is helping you to get there, who around you is so preoccupied with the past that maybe you can come back to them later, but you sure as hell can't do the journey with them. Kendra said, don't pay attention to my cocoon. You know your cocoon beautiful, shawty. You be rocking your cocoon, don't trip. But sometimes we gotta let the cocoon go, though. The cocoon get heavy. You can't fly with a cocoon. But you need it for the transformation period. So, in the process of becoming fearless, you have to look forward and you have to notice, first of all, what you value. Because once you know what you value, you get clarity on what you're afraid of losing. Hey, Michelle. Welcome to Asylum. So you get the clarity on what you're afraid of losing, and that requires activating a part of your mind that shuts down when you're in fight, flight, freeze, faint. You say F the whole thing and you just lash out angry, or in this mode that feels temporarily powerful, this reactive mode, this impulse, this reflex, this part of your muscle memory's past. It's not meaningful. So essentially you make that choice. You cut off the cocoon aspect, you cut off the larval aspect, you get in the present, which is your transformation state. You get clear on where you want to go. You get clear about what you value and therefore what would be worth keeping and what you don't want to lose, what you will later regret losing as part of the future journey. And again, I got to remind you that what is in the mind of a butterfly that was imaginable to the larvae? What was imaginable to the caterpillar? Down there on the ground, no view of everything that the butterfly can see to flight, no view of beauty, and preoccupied with trying to make all them little legs work instead of making two beautiful broad wings work. So that's why we use values. The values have an abstraction that allows you to let go of the how, let go of the concrete implementation, and just trust that when you arrive at the place as the new you, from within you, you'll be able to project your values onto what are called vectors, the things around you that made the journey with you. And this is the concept of instrumental and terminal value. You really can't know your new terminal value before you actually hit a new way of thinking, until you have clarity on your higher self, until you spend less time within that value system. And I don't mean that in no pretty way. Literally, during a fight, flight, freeze, faint state, your emotional values are being represented predominantly by the math being done in your amygdala. By activating your values, your beauty, the things you appreciate, your relationships, the things that are meaningful. That's where the word meaningful comes from. The things that actually mean something to you other than cover your ass and run. The things that you would run back for. Those things, if you have them as concrete things like material things, cars, a specific house, cross colors clothing back in the day, if you're stuck in the past, then, and you were wounded by possibly not getting some of those things, and you choose to carry the weight of overcompensation and just amplifying that mask of prior measures and signals of success with you forward, again, you're going to have cocoon furniture that you're trying to carry as a butterfly. You're not flying, you're hopping. You're going to take that baggage with you, stuff that's irrelevant. So the core idea is that you have to physiologically activate the part of your brain that is your higher self, the part that showed up later, the more abstract parts. And the more abstract parts don't super care about the implementation. But you have to choose an implementation. You have to project your values onto something. You have to choose something so that your mind thinks of something other than the fear. Again, keep in mind that you have no idea who you will be on the other side. You just know that that manifestation of you will be the result of having put forward repeated, incremental, adjusting, dedicated, focused iterations of looking at your truth as an empirical entity, as opposed to an amplified noise, fear, anxiety, reactive anger, jealousy, envy, comparison. All those disempowered elements are bound to an outside measure of value, an outside locus of control. So when you get clear on the things that you're willing to fight for, you're willing to repeatedly look for as part of your meaning in your day, and when you have the gratitude that they're there now and that you choose to continue to carry them forward, that becomes the lesson learned in the moment. The lesson replaces the fear so that next time you feel that way, next time that signal shows up, you know to evoke your values, you know to act, you know what to do. You don't get caught up in the drama. You don't self-sabotage. That trigger is no longer a trigger for self-destruction. It's a trigger for inspired action. And all that happens within the space of the transformation. A lot of people like the cycle of the breath as the moment for transformation. In any given moment, you know you have your breath with you. And if you notice it, it becomes a signal as to how your whole body is feeling in the moment. If someone scares the crap out of you, you hold your breath. You want to whoop someone's ass, you might hold your breath so that you can save it for something coming out, and you know that it's not going to come out any other way than those words, right? So you're like holding all that energy in. So in the moment, and one thing that's interesting is I think humans are the only animals that can use consciousness to separate breath from physiological activity. But we still have inherited the mechanism of tracking that breath as a subconscious signal of how at peace we are. So a deep diaphragmatic breath reminds you subconsciously, physiologically, a cleansing breath, that you're safe. Whereas some short, shallow breaths usually connected to your ribs constricting when you're off sprinting. When you create that state, that fear state subconsciously, physiologically, you create that feeling. A lot of times we do that subconsciously as an amplifier of what's truly out there, the danger that's truly relevant and responsive and indicative of really an opportunity to grow, to an opportunity to learn that lesson in that moment, if you're there, if you're present. So I think that's my whole thought around the concept of fearlessness. I appreciate you guys riding with me in Asylum. As always, during the holidays, I'm wide open to do discovery calls with folks because I know this is a stressful time. And my first call with you, video call or whatever, is a gift. So reach out, get that. Whatever happens to be on your mind at the time, we work through that. We look at some structures. We look at where you're going to go from there, ideally. And again, we don't focus on the how initially. We focus on the why and the what. We get you that clarity as to what's on the other side that is valuable enough to stop wasting your energy on fear and anxiety and stuckness. Because the clarity of that is what works. So Don't wait for New Year's resolution. Those don't work. They don't work because you've been spending all this time that could have been time to be productive, guilting yourself. And every year we do this. So by changing the habit now, you basically show yourself that this is going to be a different year. All right? Reach out to me. Thanks for joining me in Silent. Dr. Manny, I'm out.